Ooh, this is exotic. Muscle Cat Media. Nice. Cultural.
Well, back on the baseball expats, and it is a two-man weave this week as our man Eric. What I need to do is, like the like soundboards that you can get where you just repeat the same thing over and over again. But most of the time it's sound effects. But we need to put on a soundboard that Eric's not here and he's doing something else and he couldn't make it because it seems as though I'm saying that once every other week. It's a long way of me saying Eric's not here again. It's Rolsey and Spoon. But Spoon, look, you've been the ultimate glue guy for this show for years. And, the show must go on even if Eric can't be here.
Show must go on. We've only got a couple more shows before the All-Star break. We'll have to figure out what our schedule looks like for next week, given the little break in play. But yeah, keen to chat a bit of baseball as we come up to what they always call the halfway mark, even though it's always a little more than 81 games. And
yeah,
find it funny when a lot of like baseball analysis compares counting stats in the first half and second half as if they were perfectly split when they weren't. Like how many home runs they hit in the first half when they had 100 games to do it.
It's interesting too, right? I mean, I guess I can't think of a sport that does its All-Star game that is perfectly halfway. I mean, the NBA All-Star game is sort of the same, right? Like it's after the halfway point, and it's a game that doesn't matter. I mean, similar to the Pro Bowl, right? Like it's at the end of the season for the NFL. I can't think of a league that does that, but they do seem to. I mean, even if you get on the official MLB stats portal, like it'll have in the splits before All-Star break and after All-Star break.
Yeah.
And you're right.
They call
like
it
the
first
averages,
half and second half.
Yeah. But and the averages, well, I actually do think they've changed that. I think at least in the MLB portal, it used to say first and second. It actually now says before and after because maybe somebody basically was, it's like this isn't technically halfway. I will say in the minor leagues, they are split that way because minor league playoffs are based on first half and second half records. So if you win the first half of a league in the minors, you automatically go to the playoffs, regardless of what you do in the second half. And then that's when they tend to have their breaks in their all-star games. So I guess in the minor leagues, it's probably split exactly down the middle, but that's because it has to be based on the way that they do their playoffs. So it actually is, it is kind of funny because we do call it, the first half of the season is coming to an end. Even though it's probably more like, it's probably not quite 3/5, but it's probably closer to 3/5 than 1/2.
Yeah, I think halfway was probably last week, right? Like most teams are around that 85, 86 game played mark, maybe even more now. I think probably like 90 games. So it was probably a couple of weeks ago we were officially halfway, but that's all right. We'll stick with the lingo. It's a sport etched in history, right?
Yeah, and don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. If you listen to this show for long enough, you know that's a mantra that we live by. If you listened last week, we went through and created a 113 win team. Was it 113 win? No, they were better than that, weren't they?
Was it 118?
I can't remember. I'll have to pull it up. We put together a really good team for the National League All-Star team. You could say it's better than the National League All-Star team that'll take the field in Philadelphia next week. Some have. I will. Spoon will. You'll back me up on that.
No,
we're going to do that again today with the American League, but old mate's not here. So we're going to save that for the weekend pickoff. So we'll have a little bit longer show on Friday where we go through and see if we can create a better American League team than we did a National League team. And I'll pull up what the actual winning total for that was. The problem is we've been doing so many of these and they've just been getting progressively better that it's hard for me to remember what the actual win total was. I want to say maybe it was 116. I can't remember. We'll have the exact number. I didn't bother pulling it up because we're not going to do it today. We'll wait for Eric to come back. But your early thoughts on whether or not you think we'll be able to beat the National League team later this week, Spoon?
I mean, it's tough to say. The AL is probably. I think that the biggest concern we had with the NL team was we've got to take a Rockies player, but we ended up taking the catcher Goodman, and that did really well for us. And he's a genuine all-star himself. I think with the American League, the really bad teams, and we were just talking about one of them off air, Kansas City Royals, they have maybe the best shortstop in baseball.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have an easier time picking superstar level players from the underperforming teams. And if we do that properly and we save the spots for, the superstar teams at the top when we go in reverse order, on paper, I like to think that we should be able to. But at the same time, we have to reach a point eventually where these teams just tap out, right? I mean, obviously, the constraints on some of these are different. It's a lot harder to build a superstar team where the guys have two first names or whatever one of them was. But I think, we're probably going to reach our peak with this sooner or later. And the AL team might be the true test of that.
I think what we should do before the season ends is we should try and get as close to 162-0 as we can. Or maybe the three of us go away and put together our best teams without cheating by looking at the algorithm. And I imagine the teams would probably end up being pretty similar, but would the three of us go away and try and create the team with the most wins that we possibly can and put a full roster together? We'd have to create some constraints, I would imagine, but seeing how we could create the best team possible individually in a vacuum and see which of those teams
ends up winning. Dodgers GM.
Yeah, when you just have unlimited resources and unlimited fun tokens, which they call money.
I think what would be cool, depending how many we get to, is to build a bracket randomly generated with all the theme teams that we've done over the years and see how they play off. I mean, based on what we've seen so far, probably it's just going to be the AL versus the NL All Stars in the the theme team World Series. But I don't know, there's been some sneaky good teams there. Like that switch hitting team was really good. If we tinkered with it enough, we'd probably have to go back to some of the historical ones and make sure we fleshed out a proper bullpen and rotation, because I'm not sure we've always followed the same rule. Yeah. But if we did it properly and we were able to just simulate some series through, I don't know, MLB The Show or whatever, would be cool to see which theme team was the best theme team.
Well, look, we will endeavor to put together the American League All-Star team. The actual American League All-Star team has already been named, but we'll put together a better one on Friday. And because I know that team we put together for the NL last week probably got me more excited than the actual All-Star game next week. And look, before we move on, we do have some things we want to talk about, some crazy things that happened during the week in baseball. And Spoon mentioned it there. We want to talk about some under and overachievers as we get close to the halfway mark, as I do Dr. Evil laser in my two air quotes, we'll call them. Let's take a look at the Destiny draft board because, look, Ibo had sort of an up and down day. Kevin Gossman went for him today, went 5 1/3. And what did he strike out? 8?
Yeah.
And had 4 earned runs. But as you reminded me, as I was watching the United States get obliterated by Belgium, and deservedly so, he was probably lucky that 3 or 4 of the other runs that they gave up weren't earned. And in some ways, Ibo was a little bit fortunate today, I'd say, and he is leading the way at 29 points as we record.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of benefit of it last round. I think Will Warren had an almost identical stat line where he gave up like 6 or 7 runs, but majority of them weren't earned. So look, now that it's not going my favor, I'm going to be consistent. I'm not going to take pot shots, but it is a little quirk in our scoring system, which, lines up with how it's done in the majors as well. You can give up 10 unearned runs and your ERA doesn't move a smidge, and that's how it works in Destiny Draft as well. But yeah, I think, Ibo's in a really, really good spot. Your team's in a great spot too. We just spoke about off-air. Scooble and Warren tomorrow, both are going to go again, most likely on Monday. The only exception to that is that sometimes teams try to reset their rotation for after the break, or if guys are pitching at the All-Star game. Scooble might be. I don't know. I mean, Will Warren wouldn't be. Then sometimes they can skip a start. But on paper, we, a bit of back of the napkin math, we think you're going to get 4 more starts out of your 2 pitchers, which puts you in a really strong spot.
It's a good point, actually. I don't know if Scooble is. I can't imagine that he would be with the amount of time that he's lost.
But the Tigers need a representative.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know if he was named as one of the pitchers or not. So yeah, it is a good point. But I would still think that the Tigers probably wanted him to get his work in after being out for as long as he was. I mean, even if he goes 4 or 5 innings, I mean, we've seen in the Scooble start that he can go 4 innings and still get 7 strikeouts, which would be awfully helpful for me. So anyways, Ibo's at 29 points after today's action. Spoon sitting in second at 24. I'm at 20 points in third, but I should still get 2 starts, hopefully from Tarek Skubal and Will Warren. The pick of Taylor Trammell is proving to be futile at best. But if we think back, I mean, the guys that I had available to me, I mean, I think Jack Caglione was probably one of the other guys I was tossing up, and he's only been a point better. So, taking 2 pitchers as your first 2 picks is, I mean, that's where I thought all the risk reward was going to come from. And Taylor Trammell has struck out 7 times and only gotten 4 hits. So that's where his struggles have been. And speaking of struggles, you sort of flipped one of my favorite sentences I've ever said on this show a couple weeks ago. You flipped it for Eric the other day and said that Logan Webb now has -4 of Eric's 3 points.
Man, that was crazy at Colorado as well. Like on paper, it looked like the kind of matchup. I mean, for a long time on this show, when we've been doing Destiny Draft, you kind of circle opportunities against the Rockies, right, as a way to kind of stack up whether you're a pitcher or a hitter. Yeah, it worked for me with a couple of D-backs hitters back in round 1. It just didn't go to plan at all. He gave up 7 earned runs, only struck out a couple. Realistically, could have been worse. I think he got his last strikeout with the bases loaded. I mean, there's a world out there where that -4 is -8 or 9. And yeah, Buxton didn't end up going to the IL. He has played a couple of games. So Eric's kind of a little bit off the hook there, but with a mountain to climb from Contreras and Buxton. And me, I'm on borrowed time in second position. I'll get one more start out of McLean. Jack's been fine, but as you mentioned, all those third round guys were, pretty like for like. And for once, if you look at the undrafted leaderboard, maybe with the exception of Hunter Goodman, you're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic there by saying, what if I did this and what if I did that? Because it felt like a thin draft pool at the start, and that's kind of how it's played out. And insult to injury for me, Julio Rodriguez getting hit in the head by a ball and going under the concussion IL, which is not surprising at all if you follow the demise of many of the players that open up in our packs. We've seen it all. We've seen personal leave for family tragedies. We've seen second opinions before being shut down for the season with Aaron Judge. And now J-Rod is unlikely to be rushed back, I would imagine, before the break. So I'm pretty much stuck at 24 points. I might get a few more. I might get to 30. But looking at the scores on the season, I mean, round 1, I was victorious with 44. Round 2, Canary was victorious with 44. Then I went ballistic last round with 50. With a week to go, I think that 50 is really in danger of being broken. We'll see one more Kevin Gossman start for Ibo, but 2 more Bryce Miller starts. Look, Ellie De La Cruz has struck out 11 times, and that's really holding that score down. But look, 29 with half of his pitching done and, effectively half of the games done so far. I think we could see a season record for Ibo or yourself if you're able to push up and beyond that 50 mark.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's where the race is, right? Because he's probably got 3 starts left, and all going well for me, I should have 4 starts left. And, 9 points is doable for a starting pitcher, and that's what the deficit is for me at the moment. So, yeah, it could be a lot of fun. But, I mean, yeah, credit to Ibo for taking Bryce Miller and Kevin Gossman, which probably wasn't as sexy as the Tarek Skubal Will Warren selection.
Are you like thinking where I'm thinking this week after not having it? I'm not sure I want to go back to not having 2 starting pitchers.
It all depends on whether or not you've got the cats,
yeah, it's who
right?
you take.
Like, you've got to have the guys.
Yeah, but I mean, after having it last week, and I know you score in bunches, but to take a position player who's meant to be ticking you along, and then he goes to the IL anyway, you'd almost rather, if someone's going to the IL, you'd almost rather it's a pitcher, right? And he makes one of his 2 outings or whatever, because he's not going to be hurt when you draft him, hopefully. And then if something happens, he gets you a partial outing and then he gets pulled like a Ranger Suarez yesterday. But then you're missing out the rest of the way on 1 start as opposed to missing out on 14 days of, opportunities to collect your hits, runs, and RBIs. I'm just kind of, yeah, obviously it's who you take, not what you take a lot of the time. But like apples for apples, I think I want to be going back to 2 starting pitchers if I get the chance next round.
Well, and it comes down to who's available. And I think at least the question probably that we have answered in doing this has been an average starting pitcher, especially one that's going to get 3 starts, you would rather take over an average offensive player.
Yeah.
That's what we're finding. But if it's, if you're getting super high quality guys on the offensive side, then, I mean, for instance, if we take a look at the last week, which is a little bit, I guess it's probably a little bit skewed, but maybe it's not. I mean, if we look at the Destiny Draft leaderboard across baseball for the last week, a Eury Pérez, who we'll talk about in just a second, is the only pitcher that's in the top 10 in terms of points being scored. Now, Eury Pérez has gotten 2 starts for 21 points, but there's 5 guys ahead of him, and then you've got to go sort of all the way down to 12 to find Sean Burke as the next starting pitcher. So it's all about quality. So I think what we found is we have found quite a few guys who are, and I mean, Tarek Skubal's a quality pitcher. A lot of these guys have been quality. We just didn't know where Tarek was, right? But I think we're finding that anybody that's slightly above average from a pitching standpoint, you want to take over a guy that's slightly above average from a hitting standpoint.
Yeah. And I mean, as I kind of said that, I went back and looked at the good old days of round 1 when I scored 44 points and won by 21 points over Eric in second. I had Corbin Carroll get me 29. I had Gabby Moreno get me 14. And in 3 Jacob deGrom starts, I got 1 point. So, yeah, 43 of my 44 came from hitters there, which kind of serves to the rebuttal of it's who you take, not what you take.
Yeah, of course. But again, I think as an overall rule, I think we are finding that if overall the pitching stock is looking stronger than the hitting stock, then especially if you're picking high, which, I mean, obviously I was because I've been woeful, it makes sense from the outset to think about taking 2 starting pitchers. Again, particularly if you're going to get 3 starts from them.
Yeah, and in my case, picking last but at the turn often, I get my 4 and 5 guy, and then the next player I pick is the worst player out there. So I kind of have to make that commitment to taking a pitcher or taking 2 pitchers at the same time, right? Like I just draft those guys 4-5 and then just live with the Caglione of the world or the Taylor Trammels of the world when it circles back a third time.
Yep. Yeah, look, we're learning right along with you, the Baseball Expats audience, and that really is the beautiful thing about Destiny Draft. So again, you can head to baseballexpats.com and click on Destiny Draft to view the scoreboard, which does update in live time, and it'll be interesting to see where I'm sitting in 24 hours time once I do get those 2 starts tomorrow from Tarek Skubal and Will Warren. So may the sports gods be with me, because they have not been with me for the last 24 hours. So maybe they'll be with me for the next.
Just 24 hours?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Short memory, Spoon. Short memory. We're going to stay positive. Yes, that's it. We're going to stay positive on this episode today. Look, it wasn't intended there, but we just mentioned Eury Pérez being the top scoring pitcher in Destiny Draft over the last week plus. And it's for good reason. It's because he was perfect through 7 innings yesterday. And what ensued in Miami is, look, there used to be a term when the Marlins weren't good, and it was, that's so Marlins. I mean, we've heard Tyler Vaughn come on this program and say that's so Rockies, so it does just seem like anytime you're in a town that has a shit baseball team or they're not going well, you just say that's so insert franchise name here. But we've heard the term that's so Marlins when they weren't great, and they were selling, superstar players after winning seasons, etc. But what happened yesterday with Eury Pérez, explain to the listeners, Spoon, maybe who didn't see it, but whatever happened yesterday with Eury Pérez, I think fits into that mold of that's so Marlins.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, it wasn't actually in Miami, it was in Sacramento. And after 7 perfect innings, I think I want to say 86 pitches, 8 strikeouts. I'm kind of like a encyclopedia for Eury Pérez stat line, so I'd be surprised if I got that wrong. So he was 21 up, 21 down, 6 outs away from history. And the Marlins went to the bullpen with an 8-0 lead. The fans in Sacramento weren't happy. They wanted to see history, even if it came at the expense of their own team. And you could probably say that's so Athletics for a long time, or that's so Oakland while they were there.
You could probably still say it.
Yeah. And when he was pulled, the fans immediately responded by chanting shame, 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 shame. And the first hitter that the reliever faced was hit by a pitch, so the perfect game disappeared. The next hitter got a single, so the no-hitter disappeared. And then the next hitter after that hit a double, and the shutout disappeared. So in the space of about 5 minutes, Marlins fans were looking at the upper echelon of a historical pitching performance all the way down to, wow, we might lose this game. And the catcher hit a home run, a grand slam, and all of a sudden it was a 3-run game. They ended up hanging on and winning by 1, and the chance of shame just continued to ring out the entire time. I thought it was funny. There's probably not many teams where the fan base would, be disappointed almost that their team wasn't beaten bad enough to see history. Like I couldn't imagine at Citizen Bank Ballpark that the Phillies fans would be like disappointed that the guy that was destroying them got pulled, right? They'd probably just boo him off the field and get on with it. But this was a pretty unique situation. And look, it opened up a lot of conversations. I even saw someone say, there should be a rule that if you're perfect, you're not allowed to get pulled out of the game, which is probably a little bit extreme. Look, selfishly, I've spoken about him to death. Eury Pérez, I've got a lot on for season strikeouts. And for me, I didn't want him going out there fresh off an injury that looked to be a 2-month injury. And he came back early from that and potentially re-aggravating that injury, given he already had his 8 strikeouts. That's job done as far as I'm concerned. But as a baseball fan, you're like, yeah, okay, these incredible feats are only going to get harder and harder when we lose that feel for the magic and the what if kind of moment. And that definitely happened yesterday. But from the organization's point of view, but against all odds, the Marlins have playoff aspirations. They're in a really good spot. So I kind of understand for them why, with an 8-0 lead and a bullpen that surely isn't about to give up 7, you don't think you need to risk it in the name of chasing history.
I was just having a look through his box score now because I didn't. And I mean, again, we all know this isn't a Eury Pérez podcast, and we all know how much we love him here because I wasn't exactly sure what his pitch count was at. I mean, at 92, you feel like a guy who hadn't had injury concerns probably would have come back out for the 8th inning until he at least gives up a base runner. You're probably not even thinking no-hitter, right? If he gives up a base runner on an error or a walk or whatever, 92 pitches, you're probably bringing him out for the 8th inning. But it just has to be not only just the playoff aspirations and all that. It just has to be that there still must be some sort of concern internally. Yeah,
I mean, it was
Pérez.
It was his second start back from the hamstring, which they said was going to be 8 weeks, and ended up being 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think his career high pitch count is 101. He's the youngest starting pitcher in baseball. He's younger than Paul Skeens, which a lot of people forget, and he's only a year removed from a Tommy John surgery as well. For me, I think there's been much more egregious times of like guys getting pulled, and a lot of them are like grizzly old veterans who, maybe lose command and they get pulled on a no-hitter after they walk a guy. Like, I feel like these cases are a lot clearer to be outraged than a guy who's, even if he gets an immaculate inning in the 8th, he's going to tie his career high pitch count, and he's coming back off, one short-term injury recently and one much more serious long-term injury about a year ago. I'd love to be able to laugh at the Marlins for it, but I think they made the right call.
So, I mean, you talk about the Marlins fans being upset about it, and largely, I would I try to put myself in those shoes as well. Like, if you're there and you have a chance to witness history, I mean, something that's only been done 24 times in Major League history, dating back nearly 150 years, and the guy's just pulled and doesn't allow, isn't even allowed to come out for the 8th inning. I probably feel like I would be upset as well, just because you're like, dude, I have a chance to witness something that a fraction of people have ever been able to witness in history, right? But look, I think it does make sense. And I think if the Marlins are able to make a deep run in the postseason, you look back at decisions like this and go, well, it was all sort of worth it. I do
wonder, I mean, 92 pitches, right? But 21 up, 21 down. He threw 56 strikes, 36 balls. So there must have been a lot of full counts in there, right? Like it probably wasn't the most dominant, not to belittle the accomplishment, but I don't think it was the most dominant perfect 7. Like I'm imagining some long ABs in there. To get to 92 pitches perfect, I think the average guy would be 65, 70. So I'm going to assume he was kind of flirting with danger a few times with some full counts where he had to bring out his best stuff, but then also those are high pressure pitches. So it's not just 92 and a lot of lazy fly outs after he, had a few fouled off, but I'm going to guess there were situations there where as it went on, he was in higher and higher pressure situations, had to wind back and deliver the better stuff. And that 92 is probably a lot worse when you consider that.
Well, look, you talk about some of the other instances which you've seen it happen, disgruntled guys who maybe haven't been sharp, but have been able to, manage a no-hitter despite 3 or 4 walks or an error or 2 or what have you. But I actually did go in and look this up. So we talked about the fact that there have been 24 no-hitters or perfect games thrown in Major League history. there have only ever been 3 times, including a Eury Pérez a couple days ago, where a pitcher has been pulled after 7 innings, 27 up and 27 down. It happened to Rich Hill. Incidentally enough, they were both Dodgers when they did this. This will be the only time we talk about the Dodgers today. Rich Hill, 2016, was pulled due to a blister. And then only 4 years ago, Clayton Kershaw, when he came back from that injury, was on a pitch count restriction, 27 up, 27 down at one point in 2022, or 21 up, 21 down in 2022, and he was pulled as well. So interestingly enough, I mean, obviously we've seen guys that have lost perfect games in the 9th inning. I mean, we've seen Yoshinobu Yamamoto nearly do it twice this year, right? There was the famous case of Andres Galarraga, or Armando Galarraga, rather, who nearly did it for the White Sox and should have gotten the perfect game, but it was the wrong call that was made at first base when he clearly got there before the base runner. But these are talking about the 3 guys that were pulled exactly after the 7th inning after being perfect. It's only happened 3 times, which surprised me.
I remember the Kershaw one, and that's an example of where I don't care about the pitch count. This guy's in like the twilight of his Hall of Fame career. Let him go for it. Eury Pérez is going to pitch at a high level for another 10 years. I don't think this is the only time he's going to go close. I think he's brilliant. And when he figures out a few of these mechanical things, I'd be surprised if he doesn't get a no-hitter, even maybe a perfect game in his career. There's plenty of time ahead for him. The Kershaw one was like, no, that's not acceptable, right? And it was at home. It was at Dodger Stadium. I know Dave Roberts made the tough call, but I didn't agree with that one. I do agree with the Eury one.
Well, interesting. I mean, in 2016, when Rich Hill did it, he was 36. Mind you, he would go on to pitch for another 10 years in the major leagues because he pitched till he was 45. Yeah, Dick Mountain, yes, Rich Hill. He pitched 21 years, so he might have thought he was in the highlight of his career whenever he was pulled after 7 perfect innings at 36 in 2016, but his last pitch ever thrown in the big leagues was 10 years later in 2025 at the ripe old age.
He was only in the first half.
45. Yeah, that's crazy to think about, right? He was only in the first half of his career at 36 years of age when he was pulled. So, interestingly enough, that, we'll call that the highlight of Rich Hill's career. But you're right, it is a very different instance in pulling Kershaw whenever he's in that spot. I mean, as it turns out, 3 years prior to his retirement, as opposed to a guy like a Eury Pérez, where they're really trying to keep him healthy, not only to make a run here, but to probably eliminate any future injury concerns. But look, the Marlins have been a surprise packet. I mean, there's probably 3 teams that we could point at that have been really surprising this year. I mean, the Tampa Bay Rays, as you and I spoke about before we came on air, we never really seem to be surprised what they do, even though you are surprised, because you can go up and down that roster and say who, as opposed to, some of these other rosters. I mean, the White Sox are probably similar, with the exception of your guys like Murakami, who we've spoken about, or Junior Caminero on the Rays. But it does really feel like the Marlins, the White Sox, and the Rays have probably been those 3 major surprise packets in Major League Baseball this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the White Sox credit, I personally thought when Murakami went down, and he hasn't been in the majors for, I think, a month now, that felt like the end of this magical start, right? And every year we
said as much on the show too, right? Whenever we went down, I think we were just like, well, this has to be it for Chicago.
It was nice while it lasted kind of thing. Every year a few teams are like, wow, could this be real? And then we get to your air quotes halfway mark, and those teams kind of fade back to the obscurity in which they came from. But the White Sox are leading the division, and look, they're scoring a ton of runs, and they've got a really fun young rotation of guys that are not big names, but they're all getting it done. They remind me in a lot of ways of where the Brewers are. Obviously the Brewers have Mizorowski, but the rest of that Brewers rotation is ridiculous. And the White Sox are kind of sneaky, a little budget version of that, but at 47 and 42, they can't be discredited. To the Marlins point, I mean, 49 and 42, that'd be winning 2 divisions in baseball right now. They'd be leading the AL Central and the AL West. And I know the NL has been a lot stronger so far in the first half. But 7 games above 500 at this point in the season, I didn't expect. And honestly, tell me why this can't be a team that makes a run deep into the playoffs. When you look at Eury Pérez, Sandy Alcantara's figured his stuff out. Max Meyer's probably had the biggest resurgence of any pitcher. I mean, well, maybe not resurgence, more of a breakout season for Max Meyer. I mean, they lost their 2 top pitching prospects a couple of months ago, who were both expected to be in the rotation in 2026, and they haven't really dropped off from it. We know through all our Destiny draft chat and everything over the last few weeks that guys like Otto Lopez and Liam Hicks and Xavier Edwards are capable of doing a lot of damage as an offense. They've got a bullpen that's extremely reliable outside of yesterday's implosion under the circumstances. I think the Marlins are a sneaky team right now that every year, maybe not so much since the Dodgers kind of broke baseball, but for a long time there was a team that could get in the last place of a wild card spot and go all the way. I mean, 2023, Diamondbacks versus Rangers, both teams were the 6th seed of their respective leagues. They end up making the World Series. I think this Marlins team is well-rounded enough. Obviously, the first hurdle to overcome, and it's something you've been worried about with your Cardinals, is are we buying? Because right now, the Marlins probably don't quite match up to some of those powerhouses that we're talking about. I mean, they're third in the division, and the Braves and the Phillies are very well-rounded. But if the Marlins do decide to commit and add more than one player on, a guaranteed contract, more than the minimum amount, which I think they've got right now, it'd be a really interesting piece. I think they're probably a power hitter away and maybe another starting pitcher away. I like where Miami's at.
Do you think there is a legitimate chance, and look, I don't even know if he'd be able to do this on the fly. Probably not. It would be too difficult. I mean, do you think that you'd be backing those 3 teams to make the playoffs come September? Are we sitting here talking about 3 playoff teams, and we talk about Miami, Tampa Bay, and the White Sox?
I mean, the Rays are definitely there, right? I mean, they're 16 above 500. Whether they get ran down late by the Yankees for the division or they take a wild card spot, their record is so far above the leaders of the other divisions that I think the Rays are 100% there. The White Sox path to getting there rest of the season is just simply going to be win the division, because I think that division is quite average and there won't be 2 representatives from the Central when you're going to have, the Mariners, Rangers, and maybe Astros slugging it out in the West. The Yankees, Rays, and hopefully, for Eric's sake, the Blue Jays in the East. I don't think there's room for 2 Central teams. So, look, the White Sox are going to have to win that division. I think the tough one is the Marlins. Can they sustain it? Having a quick look, I think last I saw they were still like $3 to make the playoffs, which is really good value. Obviously, they're not expecting this team to keep it going, and maybe that's fair enough for some of the reasons we've spoken about. But let me just bring it up here. To make the playoffs, Miami, $2.90. I think that's a really good bet.
That seems like a great bet to me.
Yeah, for comparison, the Rays are $1.04, and the White Sox are $1.65, which I'm going to assume is the same price they are to win the AL Central. But look, Marlins at $2.90, like absolutely, I think is top value, because a lot of the other teams around them are scuffling, and we can probably talk about some of the underperformers next. But look, I like what I'm seeing from the Marlins. I'm going to take one quick moment to do a little bit of excusing myself. Last year, I said that the Washington Nationals would win 80 games, and they didn't. And this year, they're going to. They're above 500 too, and they're fun. We've talked a lot about Curtis Mead on and off air, but they've scored more runs than anyone in baseball, the Nationals. And they scored 12 runs today with a James Wood grand slam. If they added a couple of pitches, they don't need to do it this year. But I think they're really a team to watch over the next year or two. This is an organization that won a World Series in the last 10 years. Not a lot of teams can say that. And the way that they retooled when they traded away guys like Soto and Trey Turner, they let Bryce Harper go. They're really starting to pay dividends with a lot of these prospects coming up and getting it done.
Yeah, and look, I'll say it on the show because I continue to say it in our text group. I wish the Cardinals would go after Curtis Mead and let him play third base, because it's a clear hole that St. Louis has. And as I said to you boys earlier, I don't think you'd have to give up much to get a guy like Curtis Mead necessarily, because I don't know if he really fits into what the Nationals want to do long term. I hope that he does. I mean, I love Curtis, and I mean, we all love him here in Australia, and we want to see him succeed. I don't know. I mean, we talked about it last week. I think he was probably within 10 days of being DFA'd, right? If he hadn't performed, and now all of a sudden he looks like one of the best gap-to-gap hitters in the National League. And I mean, his OPS just continues to rise. The average doesn't tell the full story, but I mean, his on base and slugging has been exceptional. So and the Cardinals have a clear hole at third base. So I would like if St. Louis went and got Curtis. They probably should have bought low earlier in the season. I don't know that they'd go get him now, but yeah, it's been a real joy to watch him play and thrive and succeed on that Washington Nationals team. So yeah, that's a good honorable mention for teams that have probably
trivia question real
overachieved.
quick. Do you remember what the Nationals got from the Padres when they gave them Juan Soto for about 4 months before he left?
Oh, no, not off the top of my head.
CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, and James Wood. I mean, when we get onto our underperforming teams in a second, tell me the Padres couldn't kill for one of those guys right now, let alone all three. I mean, CJ Abrams almost gets lost in some of the talk on this show because, I love James Wood and we love Curtis Mead, but CJ Abrams is having a superstar season as well. Mackenzie Gore's obviously since moved on, traded to the Rangers, and having plenty of great outings there. I mean, one of those guys now in hindsight for, 6 months or 4 months of Juan Soto on a team that didn't win a championship looks like overs. The fact that it was all three, and Robert Hassel III, who was a top prospect, I think he's had a lot of injury issues. Like that's a genuine haul. And teams don't like selling, especially superstars. But goodness me, if this is what it looks like 3 years later, where you've got three guys going to the All-Star break off the back of that.
Well, I mean, you could do the math on it, right? I mean, you're probably replacing either Laureano. I mean, I know he's on the IL, but you're probably either replacing Laureano or Merrill in the outfield, who haven't done great. Maybe not so much Merrill because he plays a lot of center field, but I mean, you're replacing one of those guys with James Wood. Big tick.
Yeah, and I mean, they're the worst offense in baseball. They've scored the least runs. You had a guy who's hit 30 home runs or 25 home runs or whatever it is, and that changes very quickly.
You're replacing, I mean, you could move Bogarts around maybe if Abrams was on that team, so you're replacing like Jake Cronenworth?
Or you could just never sign him to the worst contract in MLB history.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But you're replacing Cronenworth with a guy like Abrams, and then I mean, of course, Gore is going to fit into that. He's going to fit into that rotation. Whose spot that he takes? I mean, Griffin Canning is made. What does he make? 12.
I mean, he's the ace,
9,
there, right?
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, Michael King's been all right, but yeah, I mean, he becomes the second best pitcher in San Diego behind the guy that closes out games, but hasn't had a lot of opportunities to close out games in San Diego, which leads us to some of the underperformers. And I think let's just start right there because the Padres clearly have, and I mean, again, I know their season is not completely toast like some of the other teams that we've buried throughout the first half of the baseball season, but I mean, it's not looking great in San Diego at the moment, is it?
No, I mean, I just watched them hit 7 hits. They were all singles. They had one base runner get to second in 9 innings, shut out at home against my D-backs, who they gave up 8 runs to, which was awfully generous given this team's been atrocious to watch over the last few weeks. And then looking at the record, the standings of late, I mean, they're 1-9 in the last 10. There are a couple of games under 500. I don't want to give myself too many pats on the back in one episode. It's just going to become obnoxious. But I do remember saying probably mid-April, this team isn't as good as the record is. Like, they got to beat up on a lot of weak teams early on. The schedule was really favoring them. Now they're running into the tougher teams in the tougher part of the schedule. They just got swept by the Dodgers in 4 games. Oh, no, they won 1 of them, but they lost 3. They got swept by the Cubs. This is kind of what happens, right? You look at strength of schedule, you look at some of the metrics, and it's like, yeah, okay, they won. How many games did they win? I think they won 10 games in April where they were losing heading into the 8th inning or something like that. And yeah, it's cool that you can pull it out like that, but it's also alarm bells that you're in those situations to begin with, especially against teams that you don't figure are going to be competitive at the end of the season. Now it's kind of completely turned around, and I don't know. I mean, knowing Preller and knowing the way the Padres operate, this isn't the finished product, and they do have a heap of their rotation on the injured list right now. They need starting pitching for starters, but they've scored less runs than anyone in baseball. And they've got an aging Manny Machado who's been terrible. They've got, Tatis, who took 2 months to hit his first home run. They've got Xander Bogaerts, who's never going to live up to that contract. I'm not sure how much flexibility there is for a team that, they like to make moves, but what do you do when you've got hundreds and hundreds of millions of payroll sunk in aging guys who aren't getting it done anymore?
Do you think they consider selling at the deadline?
They should, but they won't. But I mean, like, they would get an absolute haul. We just talked about the Juan Soto trade. The other one, the Nationals did that same year. They traded Trey Turner and Max Scherzer, and they got Keibert Ruiz back from the Dodgers. Like, that's a guy that's going to set you up for the next 5 years. I don't know, though, for the Padres' point of view, who's a really appealing trade piece. I mean, no team's touching that Manny Machado contract. No team's touching that Xander Bogaerts contract. They just kind of have to go down with the ship. The interesting one's obviously Fernando and what you can do there. And he's even been getting reps back at shortstop recently. So he's a true plug-and-play piece for basically any team that wants to buy. And, he's on a mega deal, but he was on a mega deal earlier on, and mega deals have since changed. So I don't think his deal kind of looks as bad. He's still young-ish. I think he's the piece if they decide to go that route. The only other option, it would be insane to consider it, Did they trade Mason Miller?
I was going
what's the point
to ask the same question, because if we work backwards, and look, let's park Miller for a second, but if we work backwards with where the Padres are in terms of their starting lineup, part of the reason why Fernando and Manny aren't hitting could be because of the guys around them. I mean, we see this with a guy like Ben Rice. When Aaron Judge is out of the lineup, Ben Rice is a completely different guy. And so the fact that there's nobody in that lineup that really frightens you, aside from those two guys, means that you can tap dance around them. And maybe to some extent, that then means that those guys start to get frustrated, swing at pitches they shouldn't, start to press like we saw Fernando doing early in the season, which, led to him not hitting home runs, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it's not so much about getting rid of the guys that you have, the superstar contracts, that, we can argue about whether or not they're good contracts. We know they're bad contracts. But getting a haul of young guys around them and giving up Mason Miller to get an absolute haul could be the play. Because what's the point of having an elite closer if the guy pitches one time in 10 days and he's arbitration eligible? Anywhere they trade him to, a team's gonna have team control for 2027 on a deal that's going to be relatively team friendly, whatever arbitration decides, or if that team decides to sign Mason Miller, whatever. So he's hugely attractive for obvious reasons. And really, after 2027, the Padres are going to have to pay him a shit ton of money anyways if they want to keep him. So It sounds crazy because he's maybe the best closer that we've seen in the last, I don't know, at least in the last decade. I mean, he's the most electric closer I think that we've ever seen. So it seems crazy to say, send that guy away. But if they can get a haul of young players and then just do a sort of tiny rebuild or just a retool of this lineup and give Fernando and Manny and those guys, some protection, Jackson Merrill starts to hit again, et cetera, it could be a much different looking offense next season by just trading one piece and, getting a lot of young players for him.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't like hindsight-based criticism, but I mean, if the Padres hadn't pushed their chips in, we just mentioned 4 or 5 young guys that are doing it well for other teams right now that, if they'd kind of just waited and seen what they had, they'd be competing right now in a much better way. And then DeVries was the key piece, the number 1 prospect at the time. I think he's now number 2 behind the Brewers shortstop prospect in all of baseball. I mean, it's just going to rub salt in the wounds, I think, when he finally debuts for the A's, which could be later this year. If he hits the ground running, to the same extent that guys like James Wood and CJ Abrams have, there's a little bit of, as much as we like to joke about Preller, going all in all the time, it's almost becoming reckless. If you look at where the Padres are at from a rotation point of view, they've got Yu Darvish probably out for the season. They've got Joe Musgrove, who's coming back from another Tommy John and might not really figure in things at all. And then they've got Nick Pivetta, who's in the same boat. Like, that rotation is so banged up that no trade fixes 3 of 5 guys. In a lot of ways, they remind me a lot of the Atlanta Braves last year, where the season was kind of over before it started when you lose 3 or 4 of your best starting pitchers. But in this case, it's much worse because the offense doesn't really give you much to be excited about.
Yeah, look, it's been a rough first half in San Diego, and again, you're right, you called it sort of mid-April to say that you didn't really think this team was great. And look, they've hovered around that 500 mark. I mean, you're right, they've had a last 10-day stretch, so it's easy to beat up on them, but it'll be interesting to see how they go throughout July, and if they do make any decisions sort of around the trade deadline. Just before we get to your tips, here's one other team I want to touch on, and I'll have to pick on you. So this will be the one time we won't pat you on the back because you tipped them to win the AL Central. We're talking about the surprise of the White Sox at 47-42, a game up in that division. What the hell's happened to the Royals? I mean, you talk about superstars playing for San Diego and Tatis and Machado not able to fire. Bobby Witt's not having a horrible season, but Kansas City just haven't been able to figure it out. I mean, as they said at time of recording, 37-54, they're 11 games back in what you could argue is probably the worst division in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've got a couple of excuses. I'm not going to make them from my own point of view because they're nowhere near to being competitive. But I think Chris Bubich and Cole Reagan's both going on the IL for the season, probably a month or 2 into the season, has forced them to be pushing out a lot of really questionable starting pitching. I mean, you got Michael Walker with a 3.45 ERA, who's pitched more innings than anyone else in the American League. He's got 2.7 WAR. He's been great. Seth Lugo's been all right, 4.2 ERA. It just gets worse from there. You've got my guy, Stephen Kolek, my Destiny draft hero, has been optioned, I think, to AAA. He's down to the 40 man. Noah Cameron, ERA of 4.95. Their closer, the guy who's meant to come in and not give up any runs, has an ERA of 5.35. It's pretty rough right now for the Royals from a pitching point of view. But the offense isn't great either. They're 20th in baseball in runs per game. They're scoring a bit over 4. I know they play in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, but you can't tell that to the ERA of the guys I just mentioned. And outside of Bobby Witt Jr., there's just not really much coming from anyone else. I mean, Salvi has... Do you want to guess what Salvador Perez's WAR is this year?
Look, I've seen him twice whenever they played St. Louis, and he wasn't great in either series. He was great behind the plate, because he always is. So I imagine his defensive WAR is probably higher than his offensive WAR.
Well, his WAR for the season is -1.
What's his defensive WAR?
I don't think he's been playing enough catcher, to be honest, because they're playing a lot of...
It's a good point.
Carter Jensen back there. I don't know if I can... Yeah, I'll do splits by fielding position. My gut from what I've seen, and unfortunately I've been watching a bit of Royals baseball, don't ask me how that's been going for me, is he wouldn't have been playing more than about 25% of his games behind the dish. I think he's just, he's DHing a lot, which obviously, you don't get much defensive WAR for. Here we are. He's played, it's about half. So 38 games as catcher, 9 games as first baseman, and 35 games as DH. And interestingly, his OPS plus on the season when he's a catcher is 135. His OPS plus when he's a DH is 63. Maybe something to look into there.
Guys,
Royals.
talk about that, man. Like, especially whenever, I know as a National League guy, when the DH came in and guys were getting that half day off, like it was a thing for some guys. Like if they're not in the lineup as a defensive player, especially you think about a catcher who is just, they're zoned in from an hour and a half before the game starts because they're working with the starting pitcher. If they DH, sometimes they just check out. And Salvi's one of those old school catching types. I did look up his defensive WAR, by the way. It's basically flat, -0.1, and his offensive WAR is -0.9. So the defensive WAR is not helping him, but it's certainly the offensive side of things where he struggled more than defensively, Salvi.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem when their best young player, I know we call Bobby Witt that, but he's 26 years old right now. Their best young player is Carter Jensen, who's 22, and he's a catcher. So it's tough when your famous franchise legend veteran needs to play at the same same spot as Carter Jensen. But look, outside of Salvi, everyone else has been okay, and I think that's kind of the problem. Jacques has the second best WAR on the team with 1.8. He's only 23 years old. Then you've also got Michael Garcia at 1.8. It's not an old team. Salvi's 36, but all the other everyday players are under the age of 30. But it's just not a good team either. And I don't know. I thought they were a good chance of winning the AL Central because I was making a case against the other 4 teams, probably more than I was making a great case for the Royals. And the reality is that, the White Sox have surprised me. The Guardians didn't fall off as much as I expected. The Tigers did, but even them 10 games below 500 has them 4th. And the Twins are kind of hanging around a little bit too. So, look, I was way off on the AL Central. No pats on the back here, just smacks.
Salvi is on a team-friendly deal as well. He's only making $2 million this year. This is a guy who's made $140 million in salaries in his career, and at 36, and the way that he's performing, and as you talk about a young catcher in Carter Jensen coming up behind him, you'd have to think this is probably the year they tap him on the shoulder and say, "Salvi, you got a job for life in the front office." But it's probably the end of the road for him. Yeah, it's probably the end of the road for Salvi in terms of his major league career. Look, I can't see him leaving Kansas City, and I can't see them re-signing him after 2026. But look, as you mentioned, that their problems are far and widespread, not only in Salvador Perez. It's just, it may be a sad end to what is probably going to be a Hall of Fame career for a guy that's been a good steward of the game for a decade and a half in Major League Baseball. So there you go. We give both sides on this show, the overachievers and the underachievers. One man that has been overachieving is our man Spoon on the tips. I feel like you've just been on this punting bender for the last 10 days where you can't lose. Look, it has slowed a little bit, but in the era of positivity and in the interest of positivity, I'm going to continue to say you're white hot because you only share the winners with us. You never really share any losers with me unless they're bad beats. So what have you got for us for your 2 tips for the midweek slate in Major League Baseball?
This is true. I will publicly share a loser today, which is just embarrassing. I was celebrating a little multi I had of just a double. It was Brandon Fott, 4 or more strikeouts. Kevin Gossman, 6 or more strikeouts, $100 on $3.50. It was a pretty comfortable watch. Gossman got his 8. Fott ended up with 6, which was really good. Then unfortunately, I checked and had a closer look at the slip, and apparently somehow I clicked 6 or more hits surrendered for Kevin Gossman, a market I've literally never bet on in my life. And even in his 7 earned runs or 7 non-earned runs or whatever it was, he didn't even give up 6. So I didn't even get unlucky lucky. I just clicked the wrong button. So always check your slips, kids. That's the word of the wise from me. Look, yeah, we cooled off a little bit on the weekend pickoff. We picked 2. Honestly, it kind of felt like I was just going to stay lucky forever because first play, the best bet was Garrett Cole for 6 strikeouts against the Guardians, I think it was. He had 4 strikeouts on 40 pitches, and then a rain delay set in for about an hour. It was against the Tigers, actually. And many, many times have I been bit by the weather delay. They come back out, they roll the tarps off, and all of a sudden the, sexy starting pitcher that you were looking at has been replaced by some dude with a mustache and a 7.4 ERA. But Garrett Cole somehow survived the rain delay, and he came back out and finished that one off for us. So we were off to a good start. The other play, the value play at $4.10, was Bennett and Detmers to both get 6. Bennett got 6 and Detmers got 5. So is that the tide starting to turn for the tips on this show? We're going to have to wait and see. I've got a couple tomorrow. First one I'm really excited to watch features a guy I just mentioned before and a team we just spoke about. Mariners Marlins. I love this starting pitching matchup. Max Meyer, Brian Wu. That's a sit down and watch job for sure for me. Both guys to get 5 or more strikeouts is $1.90, and I think that's crazy. I mean, Brian Wu has the upside to go crazy, obviously. Max Meyer, not so much. I've been bitten by him a couple of times recently with some little top-ups at 6 or more, and he kind of consistently falls in that 5 range. He's got 5 in 3 of his last 5 starts. The other 2 were a 7 and a 9. Brian Wu also has a 7 and a 9 in his last 5. So, Rolsey, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, and that's never a good idea, start with the 5 each at $1.90, but you're going to get some nice value if you play this up. 6 each is $3.30. If you want to go 7 each, you're looking at $7. So keep an eye on Twitter for staking and everything around there. Started off with 5 each. I think that's, to use an expression I've used once and somehow gotten away with, money for jam. But let's see how we go with some of those value top-ups as well.
Well, and with the volatility of those two guys, or not volatility, but I mean, talking about the difference between their best and their worst and the what could have beens and should have beens with them at times, it seems like if you're going to go 5 each, if you could get even money, I don't know, 11 total, 12 total, what do you think the even money mark will look like for them for a combined strikeout total?
I think it's going to be 12, and what scares me off there is that I kind of see the floor for both guys at 5, and if they both hit that floor, you're not there.
Yeah.
I think it would take something to go quite wrong for both guys or one of these guys to miss 5, and they've, even just looking at the last 5 for both of them, it's only happened once in the last 10. I think that's safer than just given the upside. The upside gets factored in a lot with the combined strikeout markets, and yeah, one guy can get 7, 8, or 9, but if that is required because the other guy got kind of 3 or 4, I'd probably just rather live and die by the 5 each in this instance.
Yeah, because it's one of those instances where if one of those guys doesn't get to 5, your thesis was wrong completely. So move on instead of trying to risk it with 2 more strikeouts. You know, if one of the guys fails and one of the guy has a career afternoon, totally get it. So Max Meyer, Brian Wu to combine for 5 or more strikeouts each in Mariners Marlins. Where are we going next?
Well, there's an old saying, you get out, you escape the lion's den or the bear's den, and then you go back for your hat. I think that's what I'm going to do here by backing a guy.
Is that the saying? What? No, I'm not going to. No, we're not sidestepping that. What?
Is that not the saying?
No, I think you leave your hat. I don't think you go back and get your hat.
You go back for it. That's when you get greedy.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm getting greedy. I'm going back for my hat.
I can't wait to hear what's coming after this.
It's a lovely Serpientes City Connect D-backs cap. I'm not leaving that thing in the den.
Whatever. I digress, but I couldn't let you move on and not have that be asked about. Anyways, as you were.
This guy, I want to say that last time he was too bad to be true, but he's done it 4 times this year. So at some point it's, fool me 5 times, shame on me kind of stuff. The gap between his ceiling and his floor is the biggest of any pitcher I've probably ever seen, especially for a starting pitcher. I don't know if you can figure out who I'm talking about. He pitches for the Houston Astros.
There was a few guys that I there's actually a few guys going tomorrow that probably fit in that exact.
It's the whole D-backs rotation.
Yeah, but I mean, Imai certainly fits that mold.
Yeah, I listen to these stat lines. Last 5 starts against the Athletics: 5 innings, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. Against the Royals, 0.2 innings, 5 earned runs, 1 strikeout. He threw just 38 pitches. Next 2 starts were the most phenomenal pitching performances I think I've seen from a guy all year back to back. He had 11 strikeouts against Cleveland with 3 earned runs, and then he backed it up with 10 strikeouts against the Tigers with 0 earned runs. And he got up to 96 pitches in that one, which was really exciting. He told the manager he wanted to go back out. They said, that's not going to happen. We've seen what you look like when you don't have it. And then I kind of followed him, which I don't like to do off the back of 2 good performances. Normally I fade. Done it a bit with Mizorowski recently. But no, I thought the matchup with the Twins was too good to be true. I went back for my hat and he got lit up. He gave up 5 earned runs in 1.1, only a couple of strikeouts, just didn't have his stuff at all. He walked 5, which is not good when you're chasing strikeouts. But I'm going back for my hat, and that's all I'm going to say on this. He goes up against the Nationals tomorrow. They do strike out a fair bit. If he has his stuff, and I know that that's a big if, the value on his props is just so good because he's not ever going to just clear a 4.5 line, and he's got a 4.5 line tomorrow. He's either going to punch through it and smash it like he has in 3 of his last 5 starts with 8, 10, and 11, or he's not even really going to go close with tallies of 1 and 2. So I'm just ignoring that 4.5 piece of cheese they're dangling, and I want to start with 6 or more strikeouts at $2.50. Then I'm going to have a little bit on 8 strikeouts at $7.50 because I think he's got the stuff. He either has it or he doesn't. But when you're betting at prices of $7.50, you're obviously staking a lot less. So rather than just piling into a line at $1.90, I want to just be staking a little bit smaller. I'm probably talking 3/4 of a unit on the $2.50 play for 6, maybe a quarter or a half a unit on the 8 at $7.50. Worst thing that happens is he comes out and he dishes up another shocker. But best thing that happens is you're looking at 3 or 4 units profit.
Yeah, look, I mean, what you just said fits the metaphor that you made up 2 minutes before giving it. I mean, you're right. You've got to have. Look, I don't know that I could put stolen money on Tetsuya Imai until maybe I see a little bit of consistency. But you're right. Once you start to see consistency, that line that maybe was 4.5 starts to creep to 5.5, or 6+ becomes even money, and then all of a sudden any value's gone. So this is when you've really got to hone in on these guys. And you're right, his best is good enough to do this, and you've got him in a spot where he's facing a young team who we talked about a little bit earlier, who does have a propensity to strike out. So yeah, I'm going to be forced to watch Tetsuya Imai pitch again tomorrow because of you, Spoon. So 6.5, $2.50, and then a little bit of a tickle on that ladder. Go up to
there is
six or more, I should say, $2.50, and 8 or more at $7.50 is what Spoon's getting tomorrow.
Just to your point before about Wu and Maya, this is an instance, absolutely, where I'm going to be closely looking at the combined strikeout markets. And the reason for that is Andrew Alvarez, the starting pitcher tomorrow for the Nationals, has kind of been converted from a reliever into a starter. And his last few starts, he's picked up tallies of 5, 6, 5, and 6. And his pitch count keeps going up, which is really what we like to see. His line is only 4.5. So whereas like the Wu and the Maya guys, their line's 5.5 each, you're kind of looking at 12. You might be looking at a situation where you could get plus money for 10 or more, maybe even 11 or more, but both guys can get 6. I mean, Imai could get 11 himself. That's probably a scenario where, as a base play, I like the combo more, rather than, I've just said, well, I don't want Imai for 5 at $1.66, but I might like them for 11 combined at $2.10. Then you still take the Imai top up on his own.
Yeah, interesting. Because again, you feel like Wu and Meyer just getting to 5 is the battle you want to take. Whereas with Imai, you think the sky is very much the limit, and he could explode on his day. And then I guess by taking a guy in Alvarez who probably has a high ceiling himself, and again, if they're going to continue to stretch him out, maybe it's just that instance where the bookie hasn't necessarily caught up, or you've never seen a poor bookie, right? So that they tend to be cautious when putting these lines up as well. At least, well, the only poor bookies are the ones that Spoon's been betting with over the last 2.5 weeks or so. So again, Brian Wu and Max Meyer, 5 or more each at even money tomorrow, and then Tetsuya Imai, 6 or more at $2.50, 8 or more at $7.50, and then as Spoon talked about, maybe just keep an eye on that combo with Imai and Alvarez in that Astros-Nationals game tomorrow. If you're getting even money, what you think, something around 9 or more, 10 or more? You think that's potentially a play?
Yeah, I think 10. I think both guys, their line looks a little bit low, but I don't really want to pick one for reasons I've just mentioned. They've both got their question marks, but the upside is so clearly there that if Imai goes out and has another stinker and only picks up the 3, but Alvarez can hit 7 when he's trending towards 7 quite clearly, you probably get out of that one, and that's a better way to play a saver.
Well, again, we will be back on Friday, hopefully with Eric. I don't know. He just told us this morning that what his availability was. So you never really know what's going on with that guy. He's in Tasmania doing like hockey things one day, pretending to be American, and then 2 days later it's Australian Little League Championship. So he's baseball's man of mystery. So we don't really know where he is and when he'll be back, but we hope it's on Friday when we do our American League All-Star team. Again, you can hit baseballexpats.com. Follow along with Destiny Draft. Give strength to Tarek Skubal and Will Warren tomorrow. Rolsey needs a win. Rolsey needs something to grasp onto. So may the baseball gods give those two guys strength. We'll be back with you on Friday. But until then, enjoy your week. Enjoy your baseball. Bye, everybody.